Welcome to the Specialty Deep Diving. Deep diving offers new challenges not found in shallower depths. Being experienced and knowledgeable about how your total diving system functions, increased air consumption at depth will make your dives more enjoyable. Training in SSI Deep Diving will open doors to many new sites and different activities, such as wreck diving and the chance to photograph marine life only found at deeper depths. When deep diving, there are conditions to plan for that will make your dive more enjoyable. At deeper depths, more air is needed for normal respiration. Depth will increase your air consumption and may require the use of larger cylinders. Other factors that may affect air consumption are your physical size and level of diving experience. Larger individuals may need more air, while experienced divers may use less because they are more relaxed in the water. By being in good physical condition, eating right, and knowing your own personal limitations, deep diving will be an enjoyable adventure. Remember, diving is equipment-intensive and a buddy sport. Each diver should wear equipment that will help a buddy in an emergency. Each diver must be equipped with his or her own computer. Computers should not be shared while diving. Your SSI Dive Center can help you and your buddy select the best dive computer to fit your needs. When diving in cold water, you always have to take into consideration that a regulator can freeze. If you want to learn more about this and other advanced information, you might want to look into the SSI Science of Diving program. Dry suits require special training. Therefore, it is recommended that you take part in an SSI Dry Suit Diving Specialty course. Often, the question is asked, why dive deep? Deep diving opens the door to many new and exciting dive sites. These sites include deeper wrecks, reefs, wall dives, and more. People participate in deep diving for various reasons. We must first define deep diving. Dives made to depths deeper than 18 meters or 60 feet are considered deep dives. 30 meters or 100 feet is the recommended recreational diving limit. 40 meters or 130 feet depth limits are recommended only for trained deep divers. Your deep diving limits are based not only on the environment, but also on your personal experience level, comfort level, and skill level. Dive planning is always important, but when diving deep, it becomes even more so. All the steps you've learned in your open water diver program must be followed in order to make your dive a successful adventure. A dive slate is helpful when deep diving. Write down important information discussed during your pre-dive plan, such as your maximum depth and bottom time, a dive profile, and contingency plan. It is important to be aware of the amount of air available to you when making deep dives. Cylinders for scuba diving come in many sizes. The 12-liter, 80 cubic feet cylinder is one of the most common and would be a good choice when making a deep dive. Cylinders with larger volume are available for divers with higher air consumption. Other considerations when choosing a cylinder are how they affect your buoyancy before and after the dive. Aluminum cylinders will tend to be positively buoyant at the end of the dive. So, you may want to add some more weight when diving with an aluminum cylinder in comparison to steel. This will assist you with a slow ascent to the surface and the ability to make your safety stop. Plan your deep dive so that you have a minimum of 50 bars or 500 psi left in your cylinder at the end of the dive. When diving from a boat, make sure the crew is equipped to handle any given situation. The boat should have all the emergency equipment needed, such as a first aid kit, radio, and oxygen kit with trained personnel. Knowing the location of the nearest medical facility also falls into the category of good planning. Preparing for any dive trip begins with training, practice, and knowing your own limitations. Don't let egos interfere with safety. Advanced training will teach you the skills to dive comfortably, but experience is gained only through diving. When planning a deep dive, you should consider how often you dive and at what depths. It's a good idea if you gradually increase your depths as you gain experience. When planning a deep dive, be sure to allow plenty of surface interval time before you plan on flying, especially after diving deep. Driving in a car to high altitudes also increases the risk of decompression sickness after deep diving. A minimum surface interval of 24 hours is recommended in order to be reasonably assured a diver will remain symptom-free upon ascent to altitude or in a commercial jet airliner. As always, a written plan discussing objectives and reviewing hand signals is the first step before donning your equipment. The slate is very important for deep dive planning. You should write down your plan as well as a contingency plan. This way, if you decide to dive deeper, you don't have to recalculate your bottom time underwater. Dive table problems are solved based on computing bottom time as if a diver were at the maximum depth for the entire duration of the dive. This would mean the dive has a square profile. In reality, spending your entire dive at a specific depth is very unlikely. Most dives will be multi-level. Let's say you dive to 24 meters or 80 feet. Then work your way up the reef to a small wall located at 14 meters or 45 feet. As you ascend the wall, you end up at 8 meters or 25 feet. You should then ascend to 5 meters or 15 feet for your safety stop for 3 to 5 minutes. Your profile would look like this. This is multi-level diving, and computers will give you credit for ascending to shallower depths, thus increasing your bottom time. Many divers choose to use computers for this reason. Most air-integrated dive computers will calculate your air consumption rate throughout the dive and log it in the computer log. This is a very handy feature and another reason why computers are highly recommended for all deep dives. On your way to the dive site, review your plan with your buddy and set up your total diving system. Make sure you are familiar with your buddy's total diving system so you can assist in the event of an emergency. The environmental conditions also must be taken into consideration. These conditions may require changing the depth, bottom time, or even aborting the dive. Do not plan a dive deeper than you or your buddy feels comfortable with. When you have completed your final buddy check and are ready to enter, do so together, following the proper entry procedures for the location. Proper weighting and buoyancy control are two important skills for diving comfort, especially at deeper depths. When you dive deep, the water pressure will greatly reduce the buoyancy in your exposure suit and BCD as the air inside them compresses. This will make you negatively buoyant at depth. Both factors will influence the need to inflate the BCD at depth in order to remain neutrally buoyant. Inflate the BCD in small increments, letting the increased air take effect before you continue to inflate. So why not just take some weight off your weight belt? The problem is, although you may be negative at depth, as you surface with lower cylinder pressure, you become positively buoyant. Sometimes too buoyant to make a normal ascent or to stop for a safety stop. This is very dangerous when deep diving. The key is proper weighting at the surface before you make your dive and proper buoyancy adjustment during the dive. When descending, face your buddy and stay together. A descent-ascent line can be used to help control your rate of descent and to give you a reference point. A slow, controlled descent rate is much safer and will make it easier for you to equalize your ears. Keep a close eye on your instruments as well as your buddy. Take your time and relax. When you have reached your planned depth, relax and get acclimated. Remember, if at any point you or your buddy should feel uncomfortable, ascend to a shallower depth. You should not go beyond your experience or comfort level. Due to Boyle's law, air is denser at depth, so you may notice greater breathing resistance. This is normal. Be aware and stay in control of your breathing rate. If your breathing is not under control, do not continue the dive. Rapid breathing could result in hyperventilation and stress. By taking slow, deep breaths, you will stay relaxed and have a more enjoyable dive. Deep diving also introduces certain hazards due to the increased pressure at depth. When it's time to ascend, face your buddy and begin a slow ascent to the surface. Remain in control of your buoyancy and maintain an adequate ascent rate. Remember, should you need additional gas during your safety stop, it is recommended that a redundant breathing system be tied off at 5 meters or 15 feet for 3 to 5 minutes to off-gas excess nitrogen. Because of the nature of deep diving and the effects of pressure, deep divers will always be at an increased risk for problems and accidents. This risk will be lessened through education and by understanding the potential hazards a deep diver may encounter. This increased knowledge allows a diver to plan ahead and to know what signs and symptoms to look for in order to avoid an accident. Decompression sickness, or DCS, is usually caused by staying too long at depth and ascending too fast. Even performing no decompression dives within the limits of your computer does not fully eliminate the risk of the bends. Physiological factors that hinder the off-gassing of nitrogen can also cause DCS. Such factors include age, obesity, use of drugs and alcohol, old injuries that affect circulation, heavy work, and water temperature extremes, such as a particularly cold dive or a hot shower after a dive. The signs of the bends will most likely appear within the first hour after the dive, and usually not more than 24 hours. Nitrogen narcosis is due to the increased partial pressure of nitrogen by breathing compressed air at depth. The symptoms will generally appear around 30 meters or 100 feet, but some divers will feel the effects of narcosis at shallower depths. A diver's susceptibility may change from day to day or from dive to dive. It's impossible to predict whether you will be affected by nitrogen narcosis, and if so, to what degree. Symptoms include dizziness, numbness of the lips, ringing in the ears, loss of motor skills, fixation on objects, and loss of judgment. Should you experience nitrogen narcosis, simply ascend to a shallower depth and the symptoms should dissipate. Carbon dioxide excess is generally caused by unintentionally hyperventilating while diving. Strenuous conditions or a poorly maintained or hard-breathing air delivery system could be at fault. Symptoms might appear in the form of dizziness, confusion, and an inability to think clearly. Just relax, gain control of your breathing, and take slow, deep breaths. Once you gain control, perform a slow ascent to the surface. Since many of the diving injuries have such similar symptoms, they should all be treated as decompression illness until it is determined otherwise. The injured diver will need immediate medical care. Don't ignore any possible symptoms. Symptoms usually appear between 15 minutes and 12 hours after surfacing, but in severe cases, they may appear sooner. 98% of all DCS symptoms usually appear in the first 24 hours. Delayed occurrence over 24 hours is rare, but can occur, especially if air travel follows diving. If you are interested in learning more about accident management, you should enroll in the SSI Diver Stress and Rescue Program and React Right First Aid and CPR program at your local SSI Dive Center. To minimize the risk of decompression sickness, always adhere to the non-decompression limits. Do not make decompression dives and be conservative when making multi-day, multi-level repetitive dives. Another precaution is performing your safety stop for 3 to 5 minutes after each dive. Then surface and exit according to the safest, easiest method. After the dive, rehydrate and relax. If you are planning to make a repetitive dive, there are a few basic rules you need to follow. For most divers, it's not just enough to dive once and then call off the diving day, especially when you have traveled to an exotic diving resort or are diving from a live-aboard boat. Most divers like to make as many dives per day as they can. Avoid strenuous activities between dives and drink plenty of non-alcoholic beverages. Dehydration is thought to be a major contributor to the bends. Remember to pre-plan both dives before entering the water, as your surface interval will be directly related to both dives. Also, it is common practice to do your deepest dive first. All recreational deep dives should be planned according to the non-decompression limits, because the recreational diving community does not advocate the practice of decompression diving. When a diver crosses the line and makes a decompression dive, a new realm of diving has been entered. The diver must fully understand the consequences and increased risk of decompression diving. This is not to say that some people do not perform decompression dives. However, this group of divers is very experienced, with many logged dives. If you want to learn more about decompression diving and proper procedures, you need to seek additional training. If you are interested, ask your SSI dive professional about the SSI Extended Range program. A word of caution should be expressed that neither computers nor dive tables totally eliminate the risk of decompression sickness. No table or computer can guarantee your safety because of the many unknown and extenuating factors associated with decompression sickness. However, diving with a computer greatly increases your comfort and helps eliminate as much risk as possible. Remember, plan your dive and dive your plan, and you will be headed for an exciting deep diving adventure.